Hello and welcome to Scott Rock.
We're your hosts from Climb Scotland, Robert Mackenzie.
And me, Calum McBain, catch up with climbers every 2 weeks who have different epic tales to tell us.
We hope you enjoy the show.
And remember, when you're out climbing, be safe and do your buddy checks.
Cool, right. Calum, do you want to introduce it? Introduce the idea, or do you want me to do it? Or...
Yeah, let's go for it. So, the idea of this is actually one of my favourite ideas for a podcast ever. Purely because I'm that annoying person in the car that sits and argues with people on climbing trips and plays devil's advocate all the time.
Oh,
so this
constantly.
Is
I could back that up. That it's constantly, every road trip, he's just winding me up.
Yeah, it's annoying.
How do you think she feels? She has this bit of it all the time. Constantly. So basically the idea of this podcast is we invite like two other climbers. So we've got Robbie Phillips and Rebekah Drummond today. And what we do is each person comes up with a question or a statement that they think is controversial. And then we'll spend 15 minutes on each question or statement and all kind of just like go for it and like argue a little bit and hopefully... See, what I want is like, if you don't know the question in advance, you'll get like a really unfiltered opinion. So hopefully we all say like really controversial things.
This is the end of my climbing career. All my sponsors will drop me after this.
Yeah.
And you say something bad.
Once they find out who you really are.
Shit.
Yeah, so that's the kind of premise for the podcast. We'll try to do these like every like 5 or 10 episodes or something. And hopefully get like a range of different questions and a range of like different climbers from different backgrounds on. But maybe to get started, should we all... So we don't really know the specifics of each other's questions, but I reckon, do we give each of ours like a personal rating of how controversial they are, and then we start with the least controversial, and then end with the most?
Yeah, okay, I like that.
Okay.
So mine is the idea that the onsight is the purest form of climbing, I believe is rubbish.
So mine is, should pegs be replaced with bolts when they fall out of trad routes?
Just when they fall out, or if they're looking kind of sketchy too?
Yeah, like when they look really bad, or they've already fallen out, or...
And mine is, should indoor climbing be seen as its own entity and stop being compared to outdoor climbing?
Ooh.
Cool.
Ooh.
Mine is just generally looking at controversial ascents and climbers throughout history. You know, I guess asking the ultimate question: how much proof is needed to validate an ascent?
Okay. I'm going to say that out of all those four, mine's probably the least controversial. The rest of them I can see as getting into some mega arguments. So do you want to start with mine then?
Okay, yeah, I think that's fair, yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely mine's the least controversial. So this is kind of following on from an old Alistair Lee film, Onsight, where, you know, in the film they've got really famous climbers, Neil Gresham, Jerry Moffat, James McAfee, Leo Holden, Ron Fawcett was in there, and they're all talking about how the old school idea of ground up on-sighting is the purest form of climbing, and that, you know, the idea that head pointing or red pointing is cheating, really. And for the, you know, the on-sight gives you the unknown, it gives you the pure adventure, it gives you the uncontrolled nature, so they are arguing that it's the purest form of climbing. But I disagree. How do you guys feel about that?
I would like to know why you disagree first.
All right, okay. So I don't believe that the onsight is the purest form of climbing, because climbing, the idea of climbing in my head is the movement side of it, and I don't believe that anybody has ever onsighted something and climbed it perfectly. There's always improvements that can be made there. The onsight is the purest form of adventure. It's the purest form of adventure climbing, I suppose.
Yeah.
But as just climbing, I think the onsight is not the purest form. The red point and the repeat are the purest form because they perfect the movement side.
Yeah, so your measure is based on your measure is based on how you measure purity, basically. You know, whether it's how perfect you climb the route, or whether you base purity on, you know, the style of the ascent. Like, I guess you could argue purity is like climbing, you know, that the purest form of climbing on Alistair Lee's version of purity would be like onsight soloing it barefoot naked.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to get down to brass tacks here, you know, that is essentially, you know, that is the purest form of climbing. So yeah. Okay. I totally see where you're coming from, Robert. I guess I would probably be more on Alistair's side, because that's how I would measure purity. But I mean, it's just what your definition of purity is in the climbing sense, I think.
Yeah. So for me, it's not the definition of purity. For me, it's the definition of what the climbing is. If you're talking the purest form of trad, then yeah, sure, the onsight comes into it because trad is that adventure climbing side. And the onsight there is the purest form of that adventure, I suppose. But if you're thinking, like, for me, when I heard that, it was just, well, climbing is the movement and the getting from bottom to top, regardless of how many times you've tried it before. And the purest form is the time where you absolutely nail everything.
Yeah.
And that, I don't think anybody's done that on the onsight.
Yeah, totally.
But you can't... What's pure for someone isn't, like, pure for somebody else. Like, you can't define somebody else's experience on something, if that makes sense. Like, who cares if someone onsighted it or not? If that's not your preferred method of climbing, then it's not your preferred method of climbing. You're not going to find it as, like, inverted commas, pure for yourself. Whereas if someone is, like, really into onsight adventure stuff, then that is obviously going to be the purest form for them. But this comes down to, like, personal opinion, really. It's like the same when saying something's, like, more impressive, really, I guess is a different word for, like, pure. Like, oh, they onsighted that, therefore it's more impressive. But ultimately, like, who cares in which style they did it in, as long as, like, they're doing it for themselves. Like, no style is more impressive than the other. Like, someone, say, like, Adam Ondra onsighting 7C, not that impressive. Like, probably not that, like, but watching like a woman that's been projecting it for, like, 2 weeks finally send, that's gonna look impressive. Like, and she's probably had that, like, that pure fight on it, whereas the, like, mega strong person's just kind of, like, walked up it, probably not had, like, a pure experience, not had, like, this battle.
Yeah.
So it's subjective as to what your experience is, whether something's, like, pure or not.
Then you have, like, that subjective question as well. Is it more impressive to see someone, like, gracefully float up a route, or someone, like, absolutely, like, head falling back in every single move? Like, which is, like, the better ascent?
Well, I think it depends,
like, you'd want...
Because it depends. Like, if you can have somebody who, like, gracefully climbs a route, but it's at their absolute limit. You know, like when Ondra climbs silence, or, you know, or not even when Ondra climbs silence, but, you know, when somebody climbs at their absolute max, could be 6B, 8B, 9B, whatever, but they hit every hole perfect, in flow, every move is perfect, every body position is perfect and in sync, and, you know, it's like a really flawless performance. That, in a sense, is really pure as well, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's, like, for me, I think that's where my argument's coming from. Like, from my own experience, when I go out climbing, if I onsight something and just shake my way up it and I get things wrong, and I know I've got things wrong. I get to the top and I'm like, cool, that, like, tick that, awesome, happy, but I could have done that better. Whereas if I come up and climb a route that I've tried a bunch of times, but I absolutely nail all the moves, I feel so much better when I get to the top, because the experience has been, well, the experience has been more flowy and pure to me. Like, it, for me, it's
love
about...
the ones
But
where
would you
you
not
like
say,
absolutely claw your way to
like,
the top.
is that not? Have you not got like the sport climber's opinion in this, Robert? That definitely sounds like a dirty sport climber.
He is a comp climber at the end of the day, isn't he? It's his background.
Hey, you can't use the comp climbing against me. Competition climbing is all about the on-site.
I actually, honestly, I really like Robert's one of his initial statements where he said it was more about like the disciplines. So, for example, trad climbing, predominant, historically trad climbing was about the on-site. So perhaps in trad climbing that might be more pure for an on-site. But then again, you could argue that depends on the area you go to, because in Scotland, on-site trad climbing is and still is like the thing. Whereas if you go to somewhere like the Peak District, head pointing is more probably considered like more pure form, to like head point something, get it dialed, and in that type of trad climbing. But then if we take sport climbing, I would argue that I mean, even globally, I would say that climbers are more about the red point projecting, the maximal level, and the same thing for bouldering. Whereas winter climbing, it is definitely much more about like it's always on site. I can only think of like one example where somebody has actually put a top rope down on a winter climb, and that's pure adventure, and the purity of winter climbing is all about the ground up push.
Yeah. So okay, I like that. So like the on site is not just an overarching thing for climbing; it is kind of discipline specific. Like you said, for trad climbing, on-site is potentially pure because trad climbing is about that adventure. That's part of it. But for sport climbing or bouldering, it's about the pure performance side. And to get the highest performance, that takes practice.
I disagree a bit, right? Because
I also disagree.
Right, in a sport climbing context, this is a classic. Like if someone said to me they consistently on-site 7A, and then another climber was like, "Oh, but I've red pointed a 7C." Well, I think I would think the 7A on-site climber is a better all-rounder. Like, I think that skill set of being able to on-site even at a lower level is more impressive than like just being able to work one route, and that's still in a sport,
why would that make them a better all-rounder though? Because on-siting is a skill, as is red pointing, and the mental pressure that you put on yourself on-siting is different to the mental pressure you put on yourself when you're red pointing. Like, I know for a fact that when I go to a crag and try and on-site something, honestly, like, most of the time I have like no preconceptions. I just go give 100%, and if I on-site, I on-site. If I don't, I don't. Whereas red pointing for me has always been a little bit trickier because I put more pressure on myself. However, I have seen the direct opposite of that. A great example is Mr. Neil McGeeky on his on-site of Dalriada, and in his head went to pop because he put so much pressure on himself to try and on-site that route because he built it up for so long. So I kind of think that it really depends.
There's more pressure, like, so basically I think I'm kind of a bit biased because I definitely think on-site climbing is like, I would disagree with Robert. I think on-site is like the king, but it's because like an on-site is super ephemeral. Like, you get one opportunity to on-site a route, and you could never again in your entire life do you get that same opportunity again. Whereas like a red point, fair enough, like you put pressure on yourself to do it, but it doesn't really matter if you take 10 goes or 100 goes in a red point. Like, a red point is just a red point. But
yeah, nobody cares if you've done it a second go or third go or fourth go. It's all just a red point.
But then it goes back to the same question that we asked initially, which is like, how do you measure purity, and like what is your idea of purity in climbing? If your idea is it's purely about the movement, then Robert's idea is right. If it's about the experience, then yeah, you guys are right. So I think it depends.
Yeah. And there is this like kind of opinion that trad climbing, like you were saying, that trad climbing should be done on site, and that's the kind of like, that's like the best kind of style for trad climbing. But ultimately, who actually cares? like how you got up to the top of this bit of rock. Like
Some people do care. Trust me.
One's like, can I pull in all the gear on the way up and just like yard
as long
on
as you're not
cams?
like lying about it. Like I don't care. You could go like rest on every bolt, be super happy with it.
But
I don't
suppose,
care.
Like to as a bit of a counter argument to that, like there's a bit of I think like the ethics in our country have grown up around like the context we live in. So we live in a place with not much rock and like a lot of people. And I think a lot of our ethics have been built around trying to preserve the rock and not damage it. Yeah. So I think the ethic of not falling off is partially because, well, people didn't fall off originally, but also if you fall off a lot, you end up wearing out gear replacements and all that sort of thing. And
But that's not why it is anymore.
I don't
like
think
you
that's...
get like people would give you like a funny look for throwing top ropes down trad routes that have been on-sighted and things like that, because if they've been on-sighted, they should be on-sighted kind of thing. But ultimately, if the person wants to top rope it first, so be it. Leave them to it.
But I think that's regional. I think that's definitely regional as well, because if you were to argue, if you were to have that point of view in Northumberland, say, for example, then it would not be a very good point of view, because you risk damaging the tops of the crags because the sandstone's so soft.
Oh, yeah.
If everyone's constantly top roping routes, then you're going to damage the route. You know, like there's examples of other climbs where, you know, like in Northumberland, where the sandstone's soft, where if repetitive use over many, many times, you wear the holds down. And so, again, you know, like it is just...
Yeah,
like a
for
regional
sure
thing.
in those cases. But, yeah, definitely in those cases. But more like the funny looks for just generally top roping as opposed to just going for it, rather than the funny looks for, yeah, doing something bad that's going to damage the rock, which is very much legit.
Cool.
I'm not sure we reached a consensus there.
I don't think there is a consensus. I think it's just opinion.
I don't think we're going to reach a consensus on any of these.
that was a good starter,
Nice.
though. That was like the little kind of like appetizer to get us all
Warm
kind of
up.
warmed up,
Yeah.
ready for the main meal, which is who's going to go next? What question?
Sure.
Bolts.
We do both. We do okay. Right.
Let's go bolts.
I want to paint a picture of mine first before the question comes. So there's a brilliant like a 4-star E5, like amazing climbing, like total classic. Like every kid that gets into climbing puts it on their wish list that they want to do that when they grow up and get older. They're protected by 2 pegs in the middle, hard climbing. Eventually, the 2 pegs are placed in like the 80s or the 70s or whatever when it was first done. But now, in 2020, the pegs have both snapped or they've both fallen out. And the climbing is now, it used to be well protected E5. Now it's like E5 climbing with a ground fall from the crux. Like you would die if you fell off it, like total chop route. So, what do? Do you leave it as it is? Do you replace the pegs? Or do you replace the pegs with bolts?
Need some more info. Where is this route? Are we talking like a beautiful crag kind of route, or are we up in the mountains?
It's like a mountainous single pitch crag.
Come on, mountainous. Where?
I think there's mountainous.
Yeah, there
single.
are.
Deliberation would be a bit.
Ooh. Ooh.
And I'm assuming also in this question, I'm assuming that there's not any gear that's like behind the broken pegs.
Not
So
even like really bad gear.
Nah, just like they've broken off.
Then where did these pegs go?
I mean,
Well, they're just like hammered into a crack.
Yeah, so there's a crack. So nothing can go in this crack.
Nothing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you telling me that a little microcam can't fit in that peg scar?
Or like a couple little wires.
Like nothing that
Wiggle.
wouldn't be like purely psychological.
I mean, I had an experience like that actually on the Cobbler, on Wild. No, I'm not sure if it's Wild at Heart or Wild Country. I think it's Wild at Heart. It's the one that goes up the
Wild at heart, yeah.
E7, the pegs up there are just like rotten, absolutely rotten, and I didn't want to fall off them. I did take a fall actually, but I didn't. But there was one or two in particular at the start, just kind of as you were going into the harder climbing. And I'm like 100% confident they wouldn't have held. But when they were first placed, it would have been great, and I wouldn't have thought anything off. I would have just like smashed up there. And so I actually posed that question to Facebook, and it actually resulted in the largest discussion I've ever had on social media. And I barely said anything. I just posed the question, and it was just like bombarded with opinions left, right, and center. There was, sport climbers saying we should just stick a bolt in it. There was, staunch, like trad climbers saying, Scottish trad climbers saying, don't replace the goddamn peg. And, also people saying, oh, we should be able to replace pegs. I kind of don't know where I stand in it. I know that from I've traveled extensively, and climbed in areas where ethics are very different. And, climb somewhere like Australia or the US, and they would definitely have routes that are a mix of both trad and sport. And a route like that would 100% have a bolt in it. They would stick a bolt there, and it would be a solid fixed thing that never changed, and it would be safe for that one section of the route, and that would be it. And it's quite nice.
I can see the appeal when people say, "Oh, just if the bolt snaps, go replace it with another bolt," because it's kind of like for like. But the same people get really annoyed with the idea of putting a bolt in. But it like a peg still damages the rock.
Yeah.
It's almost, is there that much of a difference between replacing a peg with another peg and just drilling a hole for a bolt? Because when you hammer a peg in, it damages the rock. And when you drill a hole for a bolt, it also damages the rock.
I think pegs are worse.
It'd be okay to replace pegs that are already there with bolts. But I wouldn't want it to open up this kind of like, if you're putting up new routes and you come across a spicy bit that you're then allowed to kind of like chuck a bolt in. Like, I don't want to see like Hilties being dragged off into the mountains for new routes.
Yeah.
Like, I think if the pegs are already there, replace them with bolts. That's fine. It's not any different bolt versus a peg, except it's like nicer and safer and doesn't need to be replaced all the time. But I don't want to see new bolts or new bolts in the mountains.
But can you put new pegs in the mountains? Because then you have this like vicious cycle of like, if you put a peg in now, someone's going to have to replace it in 20 years.
Yeah, totally. And then also you open up the thing where people can put more pegs in as well. So you see this in Yosemite all the time, right? So like a crack going up like a seam or something, and it just has loads and loads and loads of 2-finger pockets all the way up the crack. And that's because people are hammering in pegs. Some people who are less confident than others will hammer more pegs in. Some people are more confident won't hammer as many pegs in. But at the end of the day, every time you hammer a peg in, you make a little bit more out of that little scar. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it becomes a hold. And I could see that happening, in the mountains. I could see someone, the first ascensionist may have like hammered in a couple of pegs. Or Peter may have put in like, maybe they felt they wanted to put another peg in, or maybe you need to replace the pegs, so they take the pegs out and they place some more pegs in, but the hole gets larger, so it kind of creates a new hold. I mean, at least with a bolt, it's there, and with a bolt, you can actually remove bolts and replace them in the same place. You can do that. I mean, there's options there, and it always can be the same, really.
Are we building a bit of a controversial consensus here that pegs
absolutely
should be replaced
not.
with bolts?
Absolutely not. I have not spoken yet. I have not spoken yet.
Okay, actually, to be fair, like a bit of clarity, like if a peg falls out of a route and it doesn't change the grade that much, even if there's no gear where the peg is, I think it should be left. The only time I think you should replace a peg with a bolt or peg or whatever is if the route is like totally either unclimbable or an absolute like death route without that bit of protection there.
But who are you to say it's not climbable?
Yeah.
It's not climbable for you, but
yeah,
like, it's the same with putting in new pegs or new bolts. If you think it's run out, maybe that's not run out for somebody else. Maybe they're comfortable.
Right, okay. We've all got this in camera unquoted. Becca has now got to trad every single route at Upper Cave from now on because he's tradded them. This guy's tradded them as possible. And you don't want to climb it. So
yeah, but the bolts are already in. I'm saying pegs that are already there can be replaced with bolts, but not new ones.
I have not spoken yet. I'm coming down hardline. No replacing of the pegs. no bolts. The pegs that were put in there 20 years ago were put in with the equipment that they had at the time, and the only way to protect that line was to put a peg in. If they didn't need to put a peg in, they would have put something else in. So the pegs were only there because they didn't have the equipment to do it. And that peg scar, you know fine well that a little microcam can fit in a peg scar, even if it's just as a bit of confidence, even if the gear is rubbish and it's going to pull out. A little microcam can fit in that peg scar. So when the peg eventually comes out, the peg comes out. If you start throwing bolts on rock like the Americans do, there's no end to where all the bolts will end up going. You know, somebody thinks, oh, that used to be a peg scar, I'm going to throw a bolt there just to make this safer. Or this is a really hard crux, I'm going to throw a bolt in. So I don't think bolts
or this is a new route and I can't find a belay, so I'm going to bolt a belay because it's not safe, kind of thing. But
so I don't think bolts are appropriate on trad routes. And even if the grade goes up, because there's no peg there and that microcam is rubbish now, the grade goes up. That is trad climbing. Just because it is too hard for some people, because it's too hard for some people doesn't mean it's too hard for other people. Yeah, it just means that route gets taken off the tick list of some people's climbing.
Yeah.
Not the end of the world. And I don't think they should be replaced. I don't think the pegs should be replaced with other pegs because that then damages the rock even further. So once that peg falls out, I think that's it.
The thing is, I think both of us have a sensible opinion. I think either you don't replace pegs at all, like you're saying, and you leave stuff as it is, or if you want to replace pegs, it has to be done with bolts. But the problem is, everyone always kind of gravitates towards the middle ground and ends up putting in re-pegging things, and it like doesn't make any sense. It's like some sort of weird like dichotomy where no one can really. Well, it's not a dichotomy. Like people just end up going in the middle instead of like going to one extreme, and you kind of end up in this kind of stuck position. This is why this argument always comes up, and people always end up re-pegging stuff.
Because no one can decide.
Partially, what we should do is we're all the younger generation. This was the older generation that gave us this problem by using pegs so goddamn much. If they hadn't used so many pegs, we wouldn't have to have this argument right now.
Yeah.
Is it the same in like kind of in low level crags? Like if you've got a venue which is a mix of both like sport routes and trad routes, yet some of the trad routes have pegs on them. Do you say those pegs can't be replaced with bolts too?
Are you thinking like Dunkeld?
Yeah.
So
I think Dunkeld's just a
good
example of a place where bolts seem natural, seem like a natural thing to have there. It's like a sport crag. You get the sense of that place being a sport crag.
Well, at Upper Cave and Myopics, yes, because they're sport crags. But at Polney, that is all trad, and you got the classic route of the wriggle, the rut, the groove that all use that peg at the start. If that peg were to fall out, that move round the bulge and pulling onto the slab is scary and almost death. If that peg were to fall out, I don't think that should be replaced with a bolt. I don't think that's excusable.
But I think what would happen is
goes up quite a bit, but hey ho.
That's such a classic like VS route. I think almost like if in a week, I guarantee you someone would be up there hammering in like another peg, and then you just end up in this situation which Robbie describes where it gets repegged and gets repegged and repegged badly, and it's just like then the rock gets really damaged.
Yep.
So should we just go and start chopping any pegs that get replaced then? Is that what we're saying?
By the same argument, if you were to go, right, well, I'm going hardline, I'm going to throw a bolt in, some old schooler's going to go up and cut your bolt off.
Yeah.
But then the problem, I'm definitely playing devil's advocate because I'm not like a big fan of bolts. I just want to like promote a bit of discussion. But Robert, like your opinion of like die hard like anti-bolts, why shouldn't I just go take all the bolts at every single sport route in Scotland, according to your opinion?
So I'm not anti-bolts. Let's just get that one clear. I'm not anti-bolts at all. Okay, but on existing well-established trad crags, bolts are not appropriate. The only time where I could like even begin to argue bolts are for anchors, like abseil anchors at the top of crags that you cannot walk down. Because then, over time, everybody uses the same placements as the anchor. The gear gets trashed. trees get trashed, boulders get moved, whatever. Whereas if you throw some bolts in, it's a lot more long-lasting. But that is only excusable if you cannot walk down. Even if the walk is like 45 minutes around the back of the hill, I don't care, don't be lazy.
Does that mean we have to bolt the end pin?
Well, the end pin's got a chain on it anyway, you don't need bolts.
Well, yeah, true.
I mean, I would say like there's a lot to be said for. I actually agree with Robert entirely on this point. I think there's a lot to be said for the traditional nature of Scottish climbing, and I've actually never been anywhere in the world which holds so true to its traditional ethics as much as Scotland does. And I actually think that should be fundamentally like what we hold true to at the crags in Scotland, because like you can go to America and experience bolted trad routes, like you can same in Australia and all over Europe, like the occasional boat here and all that sort of stuff, but for like pure adventure and like experience, Scotland's where you have that, and I think that we should respect that.
Yeah.
I think the ethic of like turning up to a mountain route and no one actually being able to tell you were there is like a big positive of our kind of upbringing in climbing. I just think it's a shame that pegs have kind of marred it so much, and we end up with this dilemma of replacing them or not. Although I'm gonna come down as well, and Robert, despite wanting to play devil's advocate for bolts a little bit, I'll come down with you guys as well. But I think we shouldn't replace pegs at all. I think we should just like scrap replacing them.
Yeah,
I think that too.
Absolutely.
And maybe scrap placing them in the first place.
Yeah.
No more placing them as well.
Yeah.
Right, that's it.
If you're not allowed to take like hilties up and place bolts, then I don't think you should be able to place pegs either. It's just the same, really.
Yeah.
Except kind of worse.
Does that just mean that the Scott Rock podcast has just condemned all the old school climbers that have pegs?
But I think like what you said was right earlier on, Robert, that they just used the gear which they had at the time. Gear has evolved since then, and we've got more options. And also the climbing ability has increased massively. I don't think pegs are not necessary anymore. I mean, there's places you could have them, and it'd make things safer. But if you want to like really hold true to the ethic in Scotland, maybe we just need to scrap the placing of pegs altogether.
I'm for that.
I think it's a last point to finish on. Bit of a dangerous one. Talking about the equipment we have at the time, because I think we all have hilties, don't we?
That's true. Yes.
I do not. I do not have a hiltie. I'm not as bad as you lot.
But then, bolting. If we're talking about bolting new sport routes as well, like who gets to decide whether they're spicy trad routes or sport routes?
Me.
Well, that's why we have the bolting process of community engagement. If you're going to develop a new crag, contact Mountaineer in Scotland, they put the question out to the community all feeds back into it, and if everybody says yes, then crack on. But if the community
I know,
says
but if
no,
one
that's
person
trad
says
crag.
no, that like, I'd like to try, I could trad all of that, and they go and before it gets bolted, do like these really kind of like spicy hard trad first ascents. Does that mean he or she has done some first ascents on there? That's now a trad crag. We can't bolt it anymore.
Yeah, let's rewind 10 years and go to Dunkeld Upper Cave when all the bolts got chopped.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Only it takes one person to disagree with you and with a set of like bolt clippers and just go chop all the bolts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could happen everywhere. I think like for the one person that disagrees with you, everybody needs to listen to the consensus of the community, and if the community are saying that's a sport crag and not a trad crag.
The only problem with that I see though is that opinions change over time, and like. Actually, if you look at like Scotland right now, there's like way more boulders and sport climbers than trad climbers, and the community is going to be largely more in favor of like potentially bolting things in the future. So that's where I think that the traditional ethics kind of like maybe should be preserved, and that actually You know, maybe it's not so much. I mean, in certain circumstances, when a crag looks like it maybe is more of a sport crag, you know, that's like definitely a community decision. But there's some things which, like the classic is like no bolting in the mountains. I think that's really good. You know, it's like a really good ethic to have.
Well, it's because we've like not got as much rock as they do in like Chamonix and stuff like that, so we can't really afford to start putting bolts in our mountains. Like, if you're in the middle of, like, the Alps where there's hundreds of rock and it all falls down every year anyway, then I suppose you're in a bit more of a position to put bolts in, but...
Yeah. Ooh, I think we actually came to a consensus.
Yeah, I think so.
Interesting, wasn't expecting that one. Right.
To be fair, I think it's like, you definitely, if you didn't agree with us, I think you'd be getting some hate mail from everyone who listens to this podcast.
Oh yeah, definitely.
There'd be people knocking your door wanting to, like...
Oh, I don't know. I reckon saying that we're not allowed to peg anything anymore is, like, fairly controversial as well.
Yeah, we have definitely annoyed a few people with this one. Definitely.
So any time we go to the crag from now on, we're not allowed to clip pegs.
Oh, no, whenever we go to the crag from now, we're taking them out. I thought that was the case.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, sorry, we have to take them out of the...
Oh, God. Right, shall we have the indoor climbing question?
Ooh.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
so do we think that indoor climbing should be seen as its own entity and stop being compared to outdoor climbing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, wasn't indoor climbing originally as a training tool for outdoor climbing? Do you think we just shouldn't have these training tools for outdoor climbing anymore?
No, we can, but I just think that indoor climbing has evolved into its own separate thing. It's still connected to outdoors, but I don't think it should necessarily be compared to outdoors.
Yeah. So, like, for a long time, because indoor climbing was seen as the training venue for outdoors, indoor walls were trying to replicate the outdoors where possible. You know, angles of the wall, paint jobs, inset holds...
Dream climbing holds.
Designed specifically. The dream climbing holds that were designed specifically to feel like outdoor rock. They never did, but it's fine.
The Gabbro collection!
But yeah, like, those days are past because indoor climbing has evolved beyond that now. It's just flat panels, featureless panels, crazy, weird, volumey shapes. And for those that are wanting to train for outdoors, they don't just go climbing indoors anymore. They use specific training tools like fingerboards, campus boards, circuit boards, all these other wacky training tools. They don't just go climbing anymore. So I believe that indoor climbing is potentially being held back from what it could turn out to be by being compared to outdoors and being used still, or being thought of still as just a training venue for outdoor climbing. If you were to allow indoor climbing to evolve into this crazy, wacky, gymnastic, huge, colourful volumes and be totally cool and wacky, people would still have circuit boards and fingerboards and campus boards to do their training on.
But do you think you'd just lose this like entire kind of client base of climbers, like actual climbers?
Why would you lose them?
They're not exactly the most profitable bunch climbers, are they? I mean, they're classically pretty stingy and...
I'm sorry, why are we losing climbers? I view indoor climbing as climbing. I just don't view it as outdoor climbing necessarily, because it's not.
No, but like if climbing walls evolved purely into the kind of like parkour, volumey kind of stuff. Like, yeah, I'd maybe go every once in a while just for fun as its own thing, but I certainly wouldn't be a regular customer. I'd much rather go to kind of like a dirty basement and climb on edges on a slightly overhanging wall. But still set. Like, I'd rather do that than like go around in circles on a circuit board kind of thing. Like,
I don't like think that indoor climbers are evolving into purely parkour. I think like maybe like one or two examples of walls that have gone to become like a pure competition focused wall, but like I would say like 99.9% of climbing walls all have a circuit board, a campus board, a fingerboard, a steep training board, and a lot of problems set in a style that replicate outdoors, as well as the sort of more modern style. So I think that I don't think that, I mean, they might be utilizing more modern contemporary holds that are competition style, but I still think they are, there's the basic style as well.
Yeah, for sure at the moment, but I think what Robert was trying to say is that kind of setting of things that are similar to kind of like moves you would get outdoors, is that holding the setting back indoors? Like, should it all just go towards like the really fun run and jumpy kind of style stuff?
Competition climbing climbing shouldn't just be testing people's ability to do parkour.
But
being a
not.
good competition climber should be exactly that's what I'm saying. Should be if you're a good competition climber, you should be a good all rounder. You should be good at climbing on a 45 on filthy crimps as much as you're as good as doing like a coordination run and jump. So it shouldn't just go all the way to one side of the spectrum.
But and I don't think it is, and I don't think it will. But I think there's a really good, I mean, like for indoor climbing competitions, right? Actually, there's a really good argument for the way it's gone, right? Because if you were to just purely focus on like the basic outdoor style, pulling on small crimps on a steep board, for your difficulty comparison, what you would find is the really light young climbers would be the ones that did really well, yeah. So like Ashima Shirashi, when she was like 13 years old, could come and win the World Cup. However, because it's more technical based, because it's more like movement orientated, it does it has far more bias. It goes far more towards skill. Like you basically do better over if you've got more skill level, like if you've put more time into practice over many years, and that's why you see like the slightly older competitors, or the ones who have been competing for the longest, tend to perform the best. I actually had this conversation with Kilian Fischhuber like 3 years ago over a beer in like Frankenjura, and he was basically saying like the competitors winning the competitions now wouldn't be the same if the style hadn't changed. So actually, I think that people think that indoor climbing is transforming into this thing that's disconnected from outdoor climbing, but actually, what I see is something kind of slightly different. I just see the indoor climbing adapting to a style that actually gives people with the best skill level the advantage. So it's in some ways it's actually still holding true to climbing at its heart. It's just not the same as rock climbing, if you know what I mean. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'd almost turn this question round and say that, like, I think outdoor climbers are too focused on just, like, climbing on crimps in a 45, and really, like, I think a lot of outdoor climbers have become more rounded and better, I don't want to use the word athletes, but climbers, if they kind of embraced a bit more of the indoor comp style.
Oh yeah, they'd have better body awareness for sure.
Yeah, because
you get to learn how to move your bodies in different ways.
Yeah,
that's going to make you a better climber.
But I think you get a bit... On you go, Robert. Go for it.
That's kind of where my thinking is climbing is slowly evolving into, these crazy hold shapes and big volumes and a lot more balancy techie, maybe a bit of the gymnastic side that you never ever used to get in indoor climbing. Before 10 years ago, it was never that. It was always steep walls, small crimps. And all it produced was kind of strong people that couldn't move well. Whereas now, with the training aids that you've got, and if you allow indoor climbing to evolve into this wacky, crazy thing, then you will become a much more rounded climber when you do eventually step back outdoors. Like the gymnastic side of it, that complex movement practice that people can get on gymnastic training is so transferable to going out doing some trad climbing. So transferable. I think instead of trying to continue to replicate outdoor climbing in the indoor environment, we should completely embrace it, let indoor climbing evolve into what it naturally is going to, and use that and the training tools to become much more all-rounded climbers.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think that the style of indoor climbing now teaches climbers the skills to learn techniques and movement far better than indoor climbing did before. And although I still think there's like a massive transition between modern indoor climbing and outdoor climbing, I think the skills that modern indoor climbing provides are exactly what climbers need to get better at outdoor climbing fast. So yeah, I agree with that totally.
But do you think climbing walls would do better if they even like dropped the name climbing wall? Like, it's no longer a climbing wall, it's just like almost like a giant playground that essentially is used as for gym goers. Do you think that they would do better as if it wasn't even marketed towards climbing, if that makes sense?
Yeah, of course, because the membership climbers that go to a climbing wall do not financially support the climbing wall. Every climbing wall in the country is propped up by its birthday parties, and if by turning into wacky, colourful, crazy stuff, they're going to get more birthday parties. Yeah,
that's not entirely true though, because you're talking about national, which is UK, but that's not the case in America. So I think I think this is the case. This is what I was told by some climbing wall owners in the States, that back in the 90s and early 2000s, you relied heavily on your birthday parties and your taster sessions and your single session, like one drop-in session, for the bulk of your revenue. But what happened like in the sort of like later 2000s and the 2010s and onwards was actually the increase in memberships actually overtook what they had in the tasters and the birthday parties, and actually they made more money off the regular climbers than the others, and that's because the whole business changed, and it became much more about your regular members, and they made more money from that. So I think it depends on what point you are in your community. I remember talking to some friends in Australia who were talking about opening up a climbing wall, and they were saying like how climbing walls in Australia just don't make any money. And I told them, well, you guys are just like 5 or 10 years behind the UK in that respect. And that was 5-6 years ago now. And now there's like 5, 10, there's like 10 climbing walls in Sydney or something. And there's like, similar amount in Brisbane. They're just like exploding up. So I think it's just, basically what I'm saying is I just think it's where you're at in your, in your evolution of the sport in, the country.
Yeah, I guess the UK would need more climbers, like climbers, to make that.
Yeah.
But who knows? I think it's like 10 years behind the US, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we are maybe starting to see that. If you look at the bouldering walls, the bouldering venues like TCA and Eden Rock, they're rammed, especially TCA Newsroom, rammed with students.
But is that because they're no longer, they're now... Yeah, making it more modern. Like, they're not kind of like gross places to be. They're like, as far as climbing walls go, very clean, very bright, like shiny things, shiny holds. It is more kind of gymmy than like your old school climbing wall.
But what's wrong with that?
So if it went even more in that direction, it would do better still.
I think so. Yeah. You're not just if you make a climbing wall really bright and colourful and clean looking, instead of this dark, dingy dungeon thing that's covered in chalk dust, and you end up dying 40 years early because you've inhaled so much liquid chalk. I think you'd appeal to a much more wide market. You wouldn't just appeal to the hardcore climbers.
But you might drop your hardcore climbers in that case.
I don't think you would drop your hardcore climbers, because the walls that have done that, have kind of gone that way, big, bright and all that, have also, as part of that, introduced much more training aids, and that's where the hardcore climbers have all migrated to. And all the walls that haven't invested in training aids have lost their hardcore climbers as a result.
We should clarify that I don't think hardcore climbers specifically enjoy going to dark, dingy places where they're likely to get some kind of disease.
But also,
they're willing to go there and able to so they can train to get better. I'm sure if climbing walls are nice, you're not going to get hardcore climbers being like, it's way too clean in here. Like, I'm not going to get any form of infection from touching the surfaces.
But
and then
also,
leave.
some hardcore climbers, they don't want to train on 45-degree walls. They want to go and climb 6As on walls. Like, they don't want to do circles on a lattice board, but then you're kind of cutting off that clientele that don't want to do modern kind of jumpy stuff, but also, yeah, they just want to go climbing indoors because it's winter and they can't go outdoors.
Another, like, an offshoot of this question is, do you think, so during COVID, loads of climbers have built home boards, yeah? Like in their their garage, in their living room, whatever.
They're all at the wrong angle.
Yeah, well, no, but are all of them going to be like, well, why should I go back to a climbing wall now? Like, I've got a 45 in my house. Like, I can train in my house and I don't need a climbing wall anymore.
I think it's a social scene as well. But I think one thing that will have come about from the lockdown climbing walls that have been built is people realising they can train at home. And perhaps you will see a drop in memberships, a small drop in memberships from people that own their own walls, and they might only go to the climbing wall once a week, maybe for like a little bit of like social scene. You might see a bit of that, but I think largely, I think climbers are still going to want to go to climbing walls for like new problems, new sets, and the social scene and the community that you get there. Like, that's the thing in the UK, that climbing walls are the hub of the climbing community. So I think that's still going to be a thing.
Yeah,
and for just general variety of movement, because like climbing on a 45 like 3 times a week, it's like ouch, fingers, elbows.
Yeah.
So have we reached a consensus in this question, or
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I think it's still an open-ended one. Bit of a tangent, open-ended.
I think
we could leave
still
that to
keep
the
it as a
audience
mix.
we could leave that to the audience to send us in some comments. Right, Mr. Phillips.
Oh yeah.
Mr.
Okay,
Phillips.
yeah. So
our final super controversial question.
Yeah, so this one's funny. I don't really know how best to phrase it, really. It's kind of what I said earlier. There's been like tons of controversy, throughout climbing. Climbers saying they've done things and then being called out. There's some great historical examples. John Dunn on that 8C plus 9A total eclipse in Malum, amongst other things. John Gaskins and the Boulder Problems. Rich Simpson on Action Direct, and more recently Saeed Belhaj, the Swedish Moroccan climber, on Action Direct, which then opened up questions about other things he'd done. I'm not saying yes or whether he did it or didn't do it, but I guess like fundamentally the question is whether or not we need proof to validate our ascents. And I think it goes more deeper into that aspect of like, do professional climbers who get paid to climb, do they need to video every ascent, and like what validates an ascent essentially.
Yeah. But then, like, okay, a bit of to get us dug into this question, like, as a kind of idea of sponsored climbers, they shouldn't just be sponsored because of like the big numbers they're cranking out. Yeah. Like, do all sponsors not like to think that they sponsor climbers because of that climber's like certain values or something? And I don't think many sponsors would say, oh, we only sponsor Robbie Phillips because he climbs like 8C plus or whatever, or 9A or whatever. Yeah,
but if your sponsors are
so why should
sponsoring you on your values, then they're probably going to drop you if you lie.
Yeah, but then why should you, if you're being sponsored on your values, why is there any burden on you to have proof of your ascents? Is it like guilty till proven innocent, or?
I'd extend that and say, is there any need for you to lie in the first place? Is there any need for you to prove yourself in the first place? Like, why, if you've gone and done a route, why even tell the world?
Well, I mean, I
then
think
that's like it's a personal issue, isn't it? Like, as it's not a sponsorship issue; it's a definitely a personal kind of problem.
But that's just like, I suppose that's just like kind of climber banter, though, isn't it? Like, you go to the pub and you talk about like what route you climbed, but you wouldn't be expected to turn up at like the climbing bar in Margalef with like proof that you'd climbed your first 6C plus and like walk around the bar showing it to everyone.
I think it's different.
But you'd maybe say like, you'd maybe go to the pub and say, oh, I cranked out this 6C plus, and people would be like, oh, cool, nice, yeah, that's ace.
If you're doing something groundbreaking, I think it's different.
Yeah, Robbie's got.
Yeah.
Here's a video of me climbing.
Look at my latest bridge. Look at my latest bridge.
I'm only joking, Robbie.
Like me. I need validation.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because, like you said, like there's loads of people in the past who have said that they've done things and got caught out, or said that they've done things and the majority of people don't believe them or whatever. But I don't know. There's lots of questions in that. It's like why, if you were to do that, why would you lie? Why does doing that route matter to you so much that you would lie about doing it and potentially get caught out?
Well, because I think that it gives a hit to people. You know, like people want validated for their ascents. They want to be accepted. And if they can come back and tell their friends that they sent, you know, this 8A or 8C or 9A, whatever grade it is, then they get that hit, yeah? And I think that's one reason. I think the sponsorship thing is another. I think, like, some climbers can be pressurized into feeling they have to be successful. I know as a sponsored climber myself, I know my sponsors don't sponsor me for the grades I climb or my ascents as a whole. You know, I think like that has you know, like the things I've done as a climber, the ascents has built up my reputation as a climber. But that's not the reason that my sponsors sponsor me. However, I'm going to say this: there are brands that do pay more money, like they'll give an athlete, a climber, a bonus if they hit a target. So for example, Adidas do that. Like Adidas will pay, they'll put you in a band, yeah, and they'll say, you know, say for example, you know, I don't know, climber A, sponsored by Adidas, he generally climbs, you know, 8C, but he's just managed to climb his 8C plus project. They'll be like, here is $2,000 to you, yeah? Adidas do that, and that's a thing in the contract. It's written up. So that really does give people a reason to want to lie, because suddenly there's a financial benefit. Now, I know that most brands won't do that, but Adidas do, and they do it for football as well. If you if you like score, you'll get an extra $200,000 here. You know, if you whatever, you know, things like that.
And it's the same as I think that's like, it's the same as winning comp money, isn't it? Like if you do well in a comp, you get prize money. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
But I think it is. I think it is because, you know, bottom line is, in football or in competitions, there's no doubt about it. You know, you win, everybody saw you won, yeah? Whereas, you know, some bloke sponsored by Adidas rocks up to a crag, climbs his 9A project, has no evidence, goes back home, writes a social media post, says, I climb 9A, Adidas go, brilliant job, here you go, here's all the articles. And then, where's the proof? I have no proof. So
yeah, I think if you're in it for the money, then you gotta have proof. Like,
for sure.
That's like very reasonable thing to ask.
But then surely, I mean, obviously, it sounds like Adidas are pretty like upfront about their like money for grades, kind of like, or roughly that kind of idea. But I mean, all sponsors are like, even if someone sponsors an athlete for more of their values, like the grade they climb is still part of that. Maybe it's not as like blatantly obvious as it is in Adidas. But so should they then also be expected to film every single ascent they do, so they have like a catalogue to show the sponsor that, okay, I do climb this grade?
I think it's just, if you claim you're doing something that's like groundbreaking, I think you've kind of got to have, if you're going to shout about it, you probably want to have the proof to back it up.
I don't know if I like. I don't know if I like that kind of like. Will that filter
but it
down
doesn't
into
need to be a video.
climbers,
It could be like someone who's belaying you as well. Like,
I
you
know,
don't need
but
to be.
I think video is like the gold standard though, because there's been cases where, like, obviously everyone who does a hard sport route has a belayer unless they soloed it. So, but there's been cases where the belayer has been thrown into question too. So then, really, the only form of like concrete evidence is like a video of you doing it, like from bottom to top, no falls. Like that is the gold standard.
I'll be dead honest. My opinion on this is that no proof. We shouldn't have to have like video evidence of us doing climbs. I don't think that's a thing. I don't have like video evidence of like 99.9% of my climbs. I do have evidence like Beliers who can back me up, but I think that it just like degrades the entire culture of our sport, and like I actually think it's a route to a really negative place where we're just like constantly evaluating everyone based on like the evidence they can give, which I just think is like totally the wrong way to go. Yeah, that's my opinion on it anyway.
Our whole sport has always been based on the honour system. We always have been. And I think requiring people to have evidence of all their ascents completely goes against that. There are those one or two that are going to take advantage of that, I suppose.
Yeah.
And they get called out or they don't get called out.
Yeah, totally.
I've got a bigger question that goes along with that then. Who cares? I believe that the only people who would really care or should really care what somebody else has done is if you're giving them money for it, i.e. a sponsor.
Yeah, I think that's the one.
No, but okay, I
case.
disagree with you, Robert, because like if you're at the cutting edge, like if you climbed the first of a new grade, like fair enough, there might not be any money involved, but there's still like if you're pushing the limits of your discipline or your sport, there's still like people might actually care. Like it's interesting to see like someone at the total cutting edge and they've like climbed a new grade or a new route. Like I think that is interesting for everyone, and I don't think there's always money involved with that. So
I still think the question stands: why should you care? I understand that it's interesting that someone has climbed this, and you might want to watch the video and be like, "Holy, like that's awesome! That's really cool! That's a mega ascent." But why should you care what somebody else has climbed? You know, and in the same respect of if you're not got sponsorship and you're not doing this for the money, and you go ahead and not climb something but lie and tell the community that you did, why are you lying? Yeah. Why does lying to the community mean more to you than the climbing? Like you said, Robbie, like if there are people who have gone to the community, said they've done this, and they're doing it for their own reasons to fit in or be accepted, then I question your dedication to the climbing. If you're only climbing to be part of this, and to be part of that you're going to lie about it, I question why you're even climbing.
But like, see, like on the, I don't know, I'm kind of like taking a bit of offence at your who cares thing, because like all of us have watched, I'm sure all of us have watched climbing videos before of other people climbing, which is evidence enough that we care about other people climbing, that we watch videos of other people climbing. Maybe it's not always someone at the cutting edge, maybe it's someone doing a cool trad route or something. Like we fundamentally care about other people's climbing. Like there's no one that isn't inspired in some way or has some kind of positive takeaway from watching other people climbing. So to say who cares, I don't think, I don't know, it just doesn't really sit right with me. Like I think we do care about other people's climbing.
So like I agree with what you're saying. Like when you watch a video, there is like little lessons that you can take from it or inspiration that you can take for it, whatever. But if someone does an ascent and doesn't video it, what negative has that got on you? What's the difference?
Like not 100%. Like I agree. Like I've got like a massive like thumbs down for like taking videos of people climbing. Like I think it should be like an honor system of like you just respect that someone has done a route if they say they have, and I think that works in like 99% of the time. But
so if you've not videoed it, why does somebody care that you've not videoed it? Like why should you?
Were you
care
not
that
arguing?
Someone didn't video their
were you not
ascent?
arguing that we shouldn't even tell people you've done an ascent? Like I thought that's kind of what you were talking about.
No, he's saying why should people care that somebody doesn't have a video? Is that what you're saying, Robert? Why should somebody care if you don't have a video?
Yeah, like if you do an ascent and you say to the world, "I did this ascent," and you don't have a video, why do people
I think
care?
I'm going to use the most recent example is Saeed Belhaj on Action Direct. So he said he did Action Direct, and then somebody called him out on it. He didn't have a video. He didn't have a video of it. He didn't even have a Belier that he could put forward to agree with him. And he's sponsored by various companies, the professional climber. And and then suddenly the whole community is asking, oh, well, like, did he or didn't he do it? I mean, you could argue, like, who cares? I mean, like, I don't personally care, but a lot of people do. I think that's an interesting conversation. Everyone thinks kind of slightly differently on it. But at the end of the day, he's paid to be a climber, so like his word has got value to it. And if he can't, if suddenly, like, if his word doesn't have value to it, then why is he being paid to be a climber? Like, then you have to, like, start looking into other things. Actually, Saeed Bahaj is a good example, because then he started to think a few examples, so then from history on his part, some people were like, well, actually, this route never had a belia either, or a video, and neither did this one, and neither did this one. And then it was like, oh shit, he's been lying to us for years. But I'm not saying he has. I'm definitely not saying he has. It's just saying that's what it seems like. So that's why I think that's why people care, because it feels like they've been lied to.
I get it that people care when they find out they've been lied to, or they think they've been lied to. I completely get that, because that sucks. Like, if you read something and you're like, oh my god, they did that route, and then you find out that they didn't actually do that route, then you're like, oh, well, I got lied to. Why? Like, I don't understand. But my question is, like, a little bit deeper than that. Why should you care what that person went and climbed?
Yeah, if we put less emphasis on it, if we didn't care as much, then they wouldn't be so inclined to lie.
People invest a lot in other people. Like, that's nature, human nature. Like, you invest, like, I don't know, like, I on Instagram, like, someone posts something, I'm invested a little bit of my energy into that person's story, You feel something emotionally for that person. I know, friends of mine, when they've done things, I've been so flippin' psyched for them, and I don't know, like, there is an emotion there, so that, I think, is partly something to do with it as well.
Yeah, I think, like, that's why we care. It's because we're human beings, and, like, we like to share in other people's, like, successes, and also, like, mourn with them when they're sad and stuff like that. Like, even, like, without the video, that's why we care about other people's ascents. I think maybe what you're thinking, Robert, is why do we care if people are climbing really, really hard or not really hard?
Yeah.
Or no?
Why does their performance matter to you?
Yeah.
But I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what grade it is. Like, it's annoying to feel like you've been lied to, whether someone's lied about climbing 6C or whether they've lied about climbing, like, 9A. It's just the, like, you are going to be a little bit invested either way.
Probably ultimately because someone's wanting to take the best and the worst. They're wanting to share in their successes but never have any, like, bad stories or losses. Or, like, failures, that's the right word. Yeah, and people get annoyed when people aren't genuine like that. What was the initial question? I've kind of forgot.
I mean, is it just do we require evidence for all our ascents, or for most of our ascents, or for our hard ascents? Do we require that? I mean, like, my opinion is no, we don't, and I think that if we were to go down that line where we were asking for evidence, it would be a route to just a very negative, attitude in the community, and I just don't think it'd be a good way to go down. I actually think for the number of people that do get away, like as Robert said, for the number of people that do get away with stuff like this, it's just not worth, ruining our culture in climbing, where we just rely on people's honesty and trust.
Yeah,
I think that's the bottom line for me anyway.
Yeah.
Although a little part of me does want to see Robbie filming every single handhold and move in the next big wall he does, so that we can make sure he didn't cheat on it.
Well, I mean, he's putting out a video every week now. He's going to need some of that content.
do you want me to tell you an honest story? Do you want me to tell you a funny one, right? So when I was in Seiyus with years and years and years ago, probably like 2010 or something, and I was trying this route called the Black Bean, which is a 70-meter single pitch, and in the last 10 meters of the climb, I did this move to the sloper hold, And I got it solid, and I was just moving up to the next hold, and my hand slipped, and in slow motion I fell off and grabbed the quick draw. And I stood there with the quick draw in my hand, and I remember thinking, nobody can see me up here. I was up there, it was in my hand, I was like, I could just pull on right now, and no one would know, because no one was watching me. The Belair was all the way down there. It was like, the wind was like, I was like, I could just grab this hold and continue to the top. And I remember I thought about it for about 2 seconds, and then I went, take!
Yeah. I mean, I think we'd all be lying if we hadn't all been in that position at some point. Like, there's a very fine line between those who haven't lied about ascents and people that have. Like, we've all been on the very edge of that, of like being next to the cam and just like wanting to put your hand in the loop and just like yard on it for a second when you're scared, or like things like that, or like on sport routes just kind of wanting to like hold on to the, if you're at like the bolt, hold on to the rope a little bit and just like sit back to take like a little bit of the weight off of your arms, kind of thing, like little sneaky things.
Yeah,
like,
that
like
classic
all
where you
been like
classic where you
just on
clip
the
a quick
edge.
draw and put your middle finger in it and just hang there for just a second,
Yeah.
like
Just a
before you clip the
second.
rope in.
Yeah.
What are people's thoughts about in winter climbing when you just put some snow above a nut and then hook it with your ice axe? That's like legit, yeah?
Oh, that's brilliant. I mean, winter climbing is aid climbing, essentially. You're using axes.
Well, yeah, it's
Well,
It's like, anything
Yeah.
goes.
oh, right. That is the most controversial point of this entire thing. Is winter
Let's stop.
climbing just aid climbing? Wow.
That can be the
Wow.
question for next.
I actually
next
think
podcast.
I actually think this, we go back in time, back to Robert's original question, what is the purest form of climbing? And actually, if you think about it, based on this, bouldering is the most purest form of climbing because it's the one that you can't really cheat on as much. You know, like there's no gear. You know,
Ooh.
you can't grab a quick draw. You know, you can't. You know, I don't know. Like, there's no way you can like knee bar the rope to like give yourself a little bit extra rest. Like, I mean,
Does
you
that
could.
mean there's a lot of ways to cheat in winter climbing?
There's tons of ways of cheating winter climbing.
Oh, yeah.
Winter climbing is aid climbing.
It's all just cheating.
Sink your axes in and just sit on your lanyards for a little bit. Yeah, cheating.
Yeah. I actually did
Oh.
fall off an winter climb. I actually did fall off a winter climb directly onto my leashes, and the axe held, and I just got back on.
Well, no, even better, like, the leashes and ice axes have little bungee cords, so you fall off and you get, like, a bit of a bounce back up.
Ask Guy Robertson about that. That actually happened.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Right, should we call it there so we don't run on too long?
Yeah.
I think we should. That was excellent.
That was
Yeah,
good.
that was good.
To round up, though, I think, there was only 2 of them we had pretty solid answers for, so...
We're never replacing pegs,
No one can ever replace a peg, and none of us
Yeah.
can clip them ever again.
but
Yeah.
we're not
Yeah.
putting bolts. Yeah.
But we're not putting bolts in. What was the first question again?
The purity
On-site.
of climbing. On-sighting.
Oh, we
didn't
didn't really
have
agree
it.
on that, did we?
Mm-hmm.
Number 3 was indoor.
I think we kind of agreed that there should just be a mix still, that it shouldn't all go in one direction or the other.
And then the last question was, we don't like anyone that films themselves when they're climbing. Was that it?
No, I think we all agree that I just think that it's a bad route to go down. I think we should just trust people, and for the 2 or 3 people every now and again who lie, we just let them away with it.
Yeah.
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 Unless there's like money involved.
Unless
Yeah.
there's
Unless
money
it's
involved.
someone's like
So-
job. Yeah.
So I guess we're
And
all
then
in agreement.
finally,
Saeed didn't do Action Direct.
Whoa!
I'm
And winter climbing is aid climbing.
oh yeah, I'm winter climbing.
That's
Day
the
climbing.
general
Yeah.
consensus.
Yeah, I like that. All right. For everyone that's listening to this, if you absolutely wholeheartedly disagree with us, if you're sitting there fuming, red-faced, seething, send us an email. Leave us a Facebook comment. Yeah, get in
Wait,
touch
wait,
with us. Let us know what your thoughts.
If you're fuming, send Robert an email. If you like the podcast, send me an email.
Yeah. And subscribe to my YouTube channel.
Robert or Calum at mountaineering.scot. Let us know what you think. We will bring this to you. We'll try and do a panel show every 10 episodes, 5 episodes, something like that. Yeah, something like that. Whenever we can. But this was a lot of fun. Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah.
Cheers.
See you guys.
Thanks.
Cool. Right, see you guys later. Bye. Well, that was excellent. We got into some really good stuff there. Thank you so much to Rebekah Drummond and Robbie Phillips for joining us for that chat. Hope we didn't say anything too offensive. If we did, or you've got any comments on any of the topics that we talked about, again, please just send us an email, leave us a Facebook comment, or send us a message on the Climb Scotland Facebook. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Again, massive thank you to those two for sitting down with us. We will try and bring you a panel show similar to this every 5 or 10 episodes. It'll depend on whether we get people to do it with us, but I think that is something we're going to do from now on, because they are a lot of fun. I hope you do agree. So I hope you enjoyed that podcast, everyone. Once again, once we get back out there, once we get back to the crags, once the walls reopen and we can get back out, please do your buddy checks.